How's it going, everybody? Ed Ricker here, and we are out in nature, and we're going to be doing an interesting video. This is the new BetaFPV X Night 5. It's a 5-inch, 6-cell, so 6S rated quad, and it's 249 grams. And that whole combination of specs I just mentioned doesn't actually exist until now. It's a new design, it's toothpick style, very lightweight, and from what I've seen on video reviews, also very capable. It's analog FPV, so we're going to be doing analog video. That's the only downside to this, but also to keep it under 250 grams, that's pretty much all we can hope for. Let's test this out. I want to get on camera and show it to you before I explode it. Usually I do a little bench teardown of these types of things, but let's just get up in the sky right away. Here we go. We're on R7, we're at 350 milliwatts. We've already lost a little bit on the voltage, but that's okay. A little breezy, but we're just gonna go for it. So this is going to be 6S, 350 milliwatts, analog. Whew, that's crazy to see those props in view. All right, now it's been a hot minute since I flew analog, but I do recall mostly where I'm going. Wow, okay. It's a little floaty on the turns. I'm gonna have to remember that. It's definitely an interesting feeling, and I'd love to try this on maybe gates, like wide gates. See what happens. I'm just gonna book it a little more. I feel like I could use a little higher camera tilt because this thing wants to balloon up. I can already tell. So this is going to be 100% throttle. You know, that's not as intense of a speed as I was concerned about. I was like, man, this thing is going to be like uncontrollable. I mean, it's fast, don't get me wrong, especially for the size.
It's just taking a little while to get those 5-inch props up to speed. That's all.
Okay, so if I go a little longer on the full throttle, I'll get full. Also, we got some wind. I mean, I got to go with and against the wind. I mean, that's decent. That's a good punch. I usually come in around 21.7 on a 6-cell battery. So let me talk about the camera. The camera looks good. I also understand that this camera is very good for low light, but it's performing well with dynamic range. You know, looking at the sky there and coming back underneath the trees. Clarity looks good. I don't feel like I need to really turn down the sharpness. Maybe one notch down on the sharpness. This camera can do 16:9 or 4:3. So right now I believe we are 4:3. And I got a little bounce back on that roll. Let me try again. Yeah, there's a little bounce back on the roll. I bet we could tune this a little bit more. That one felt pretty good.
I mean, that's not bad.
And if we had a little higher camera set, we'd see a little less of these props. Not a problem for me. I'm getting used to it, but I think this is the first, well, this definitely is the first 5-inch that I've ever flown that had props in view. First 4-inch, you know, I really only have ever flown maybe a Whoop that had props in view to such a degree. But I mean, it feels good. Now, it's just something I'm gonna have to practice with. It's powerful, and I think what I'm seeing here is when I full throttle, yeah, it's not really holding the horizon there. I think we might add some
I didn't really see it dip.
anti-gravity maybe. I don't.
You didn't nosedive at all.
I got a little bit of a dip in some direction. I'm low on battery, so I'm not going to do it again.
You can tune that out, though.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see just how much I can tune out of this and how much is just characteristic of a insanely light 5-inch quad. It is deceiving. Let's talk about the sound. I don't hear. Man, I'm booking it maybe only a couple hundred feet away. I barely hear it.
I know, that's the whole thing. Listen to that.
For a 5-inch, that is amazing.
That's insane. Like, yeah, go past this. Really?
That's so quiet.
Come on, man. That's worth the purchase right there.
Dude, this might be like one of those downtown rippers, if you know what I mean. So this is right after the first flight of the X Night by BetaFlight FPV. And so we're using a 550 milliamp hour battery, 6S, to control this quad. I just had a 7-minute and 15 or maybe 17-second flight, which is pretty much amazing. I was doing some full throttling for testing. I was pretty much booking around these trees. I was doing some testing for sound, which, by the way, my friend Matt and I, we were discussing how it's so quiet. And that's also a great plus for a quad like this, a 5-inch that you could barely hear. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I also want to try this on a racetrack one day and just see how nimble it is. It's flying. Every once in a while I get a little wobble, a little jerk of the quad, and I think that might just be the weight of the quad, you know? It's a 5-inch, 249-gram quad. I don't know how stable you can really expect these things to be. All right, this time around I'm going to put a little higher camera tilt. This was I don't know, maybe like 35 degrees now, a little lower before. Just feel like I was ballooning up a little bit. And you see how I'm mounting the battery. I'm really keeping in mind center of gravity. So when I hold it, it's completely, you know, level. It's not kind of dipping pitch wise. So I think we're dead on center of gravity. Let's try this again. There's a lot of cable underneath here. But one thing I'm going to do is just take this balance lead and stuff it underneath and through the positive and negative of the XT60 in there. That's kind of, it's a better way of doing things. Make sure we're still good on center of gravity. Yes, we are. All right, let's go. Here's a good test for dynamic range because now we have some sun and some shade, and we have these very hard shadows, and it's kind of a little easier to see the dynamic range of this camera, which I think is performing pretty well.
Yeah.
Let's go behind me. So I'm actually flying behind my head at the moment with just 2 stubby omnis. Should probably put a tall omni on there, but what can you do?
I mean, it's working right now. I mean, you gotta realize how you're moving though. I mean, you're moving.
So that's, yeah. So Matt's saying here that you gotta realize how fast I'm moving. I'm moving at a pretty good clip, but the thing is, it feels like it's a little bit slower because the quad feels so nimble. I'm able to kind of turn on a dime, and I'm not used to doing that with my heavy freestyle quads with a GoPro, you know? And you could put a GoPro, if you do like a naked GoPro, you could put a GoPro on here. Might change the flight characteristics a little bit, but if you go light, do a little decased GoPro, you might have a good time. I saw that on, I think it was Instagram, someone was doing that.
Wow.
But yeah, man, I mean, you could barely hear this thing, and that's also, I think, what's kind of making my brain think I'm going slower than I really am.
It is, I'm telling you. That prop noise, it helps you figure out, you know.
Yeah, so a lot of these quick turns is really going to help when we try and do like maybe a track situation.
I mean, it's bouncing back hard when you go a different movement, like boom, look at that. It stopped right in that turn.
Yeah, it pretty much just does what I want it to do.
Yeah, I mean, it locks in. As soon as you go to like head towards the tree and then try to turn around, it's like, it's when you stop, it does stop.
I like that carry, despite how light it is. It feels pretty good, kind of carrying over things when you fling it.
Not like it's flying off in a different direction. It's kind of holding.
There's a little bit of a wobble there that I wouldn't have found with a heavier quad. There's a little bit of a, like when I do this, there's that little wobble back and forth. Yeah, man. It's deceiving. It wants you to go. See that little wobble there? That's not me. That's just whatever's happening with stability of the quad. Yeah, I mean, it's a guy that wants to just keep going, man. I'd love, yeah, so I don't know about like heavy freestyle because that wobbling, but for racing. I took the X-Night 5 to a couple other parks recently to do some more flight tests, and I'm really impressed by the way it flies. Now, it doesn't fly perfect, especially if you're used to larger, maybe heavier 5-inch quads. It doesn't have the flingability that you might find in freestyle quads. It doesn't have great prop wash management. I've also seen some jerkiness that happens when it gets affected by some gusts of wind, but these are just issues that we see in lighter quads. So at 249 grams, there's a little give and take here. Now, even though I didn't do a proper takedown and setup on the bench here with this quad, I do really like the Caddx Baby Ratel camera with the VTX, the MO2 VTX by BetaFPV. The combination works great for a lightweight quad like this. The colors look really good, and I got some pretty great performance at 350 milliwatts, which is the max that the VTX can put out. The dynamic range of the Baby Ratel looks really good, and yeah, I was able to fly pretty far away from me and not really notice a whole lot of breakup. The flight controller is an F4 with ESC built in, so it's an all-in-one with a 35 amp ESC. And you look at the amp draw, and I had that on the OSD. The amp draw is minimal, and that's, I think, where we're getting these long flight times. And when we're using Crossfire, that means we can really push some range on this thing. Of course, we're sort of limited at 350 milliwatts, but on the VTX. But even with that limitation, I'm flying around, I'm getting some good distance, I'm low to the ground, and I'm still having a good flight experience. Video is clear. If you go plug and play, then the quad itself is $230 US. If you go with the included, let's just say TBS Crossfire Nano, it's $255. I think with some tuning, this quad can fly a lot better. Maybe we can minimize some of that prop wash. We can also make it a little bit more locked in, especially when we get these gusts of winds. I feel like it was bobbing around a little bit more than it probably should have been. I think we can dial it in a little bit more. It's preloaded with BetaFlight 4.2. And to be honest, this is the first time I've ever flown BetaFlight 4.2. I pretty much stick with older BetaFlight versions just because I know how to tune it and how to fly it. It works great. So having 4.2 on this quad means I might have to start doing a little studying on my off time trying to figure out how to tune 4.2. Either way, with a 5-inch quad that can use a 6-cell battery that's under 250 grams, I think this is a win. I think it's pretty awesome. Even though this is analog 5.8 gigahertz, I didn't really have any problems with it. It's a clear camera, 1200 TVL, and it's great with dynamic range. This is Baby Ratel camera by Caddx, so I like it. It was somewhat nostalgic to go back to analog, and to be honest, I actually enjoyed it. By the way, even though I'm not going to do a whole BetaFlight setup with this quad, it is loaded with BetaFlight 4.2. If you recall, when I first took off that first battery, it was showing a lower voltage than it really should have been. At first I thought I had actually drained the battery by just sitting there and prepping for takeoff, but really the battery scaling was low and needed to be adjusted. So with the props off, connect the X-Night to BetaFlight and check and make sure that your battery scaling is right. For me, 110 was not showing the correct voltage when I plugged in a battery being connected to BetaFlight. Bumping up that scale to 111 finally shows 25.2 volts on the battery, which is exactly what it should be. This is a fully charged battery. Don't forget to hit save. Not every flight controller, not every quad is going to be like this, but if yours is and you're showing a lower voltage than it should be in the OSD before you even take off, check your battery scaling in BetaFlight. I'm impressed. I appreciate BetaFPV for sending this to me to review. One thing I do worry about is just how strong it is. You know, these arms are pretty thin, but the good thing is they're swappable. If you look in there, you can swap them out. So if you do go for this quad, maybe get yourself an extra 4 or maybe an extra 8 arms. I have a feeling that that might be the first thing to break. For more information about this quad, check the video description. There is a link to the BetaFPV website for the X-Night 5. I recommend it. Check it out. Happy flying.